Testing, 1, 2, 3, here we go again. It is Monday, we're on Chapter 6 of Reaper Adventures The Search. Please forgive my sounds of irritation and that spot of distorted light on the screen. I tossed my phone a couple times because it's being a piece of shit. And I don't care about my potty mouth at this particular point in time. Let's continue with disclaimer. Not kid-friendly. This story is totally not kid-friendly. Not kid-friendly at all. It is for mature audiences only. There's no sex scenes, granted. There's no curse words. I mean, besides damn and damn it, there's really no curse words. And there's mentions of muttering curses under breath, but it's not like those are ever written down. Anyway, there's mention of self-harm, which is stated in this chapter. This is also the chapter with the murder by the demon. Not serial killer, notice how I say that. Murder by the demon. And I find it ironic that the chapter 6 starts on page 66 and it's the chapter with the murder by a demon. I mean, if you have a twisted sense of humor like me, that's pretty funny. But moving on, we have passed the scene of abuse in that chapter, but just in case you're beginning to follow, there is a scene of abuse. There is a scene of the aftermath of slasher movie violence, which is just lots and lots of blood. There is a scene of murder by a serial killer later on, as well as a scene of torture. So continue at your own risk, and hopefully my piece of shit phone does not cut off in the middle of her sentence, because I will have to continue at some other time. Anyway, we're on chapter 6, on page 66, with a chapter that has the murder of a demon. I'm going to try to be optimistic about this. But this is take number 4. So, anyway, chapter 6. Payne tried to sleep, or at least nap for a little while. Every time he did drift off into sleep was when the nightmares began. Payne looked at his clock and groaned. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and Payne had little to no sleep. He doubted he would get any sleep at this point in time. Payne got out of bed and silently walked to the kitchen. He had learned all of the squeaky boards and everywhere else that could make any noise. Payne opened the refrigerator, grabbed a caffeinated drink, and swiftly and silently went back to his room. He made sure he had closed the refrigerator door before going back to his room. After all, he had no intention of getting caught. The bruises had just faded completely. Broken ribs, to bruised ribs, to better ribs. The horrible black and purple splotches were gone now, and his skin was blemish-free once more. Payne hated it. Payne had at once thought that it was normal for everyone to heal at the rapid pace he did. He had demonstrated his healing abilities to his friend Snow. She hadn't spoken to him for a couple of weeks afterwards, and would have remained silent if Payne hadn't asked what he had done wrong. Oh yeah, that might just be the light. Okay. Her response had been simple and to the point, but it had been painful and extremely eye-opening. Sometimes her response still rang through Payne's mind. People don't heal that fast. It's not normal. Or natural, for that matter. Payne silently cursed his thoughts for going in that direction, opened his soda, and took a grateful sip. Speaking of, I really need soda because my phone's seriously pissing me off lately. Soda. Slowly, very slowly, Payne's thoughts drifted to a new topic. Curiosity of who Payne's birth parents were always got the best of him, and he always fantasized that they were some rich family with a large mansion. Of course, reality had destroyed that fantasy a while ago. Payne knew that if his birth parents were a rich family with a large mansion, then they would have had the means to take care of him. If they really were super rich, though, then the simple fact would be that they didn't want him to begin with. Damn it, Payne whispered. I can never get a good thought process going. Payne sighed as he realized that his soda was finished. Damn reality always interfering with hopeful and wishful fantasizing. Payne mumbled, glancing at the time. It was now 6 o'clock in the morning. Payne sighed and put the empty soda can in a small waste bucket, got up again, and began to get ready for the day before he had to go to work. He made sure to be quick about getting ready. He was heading out the door after grabbing another soda when everyone began to slowly move around. Payne closed the front door quietly, locked the door after making sure he had a spare key on him, and then headed to the bus stop. He made it at the bus stop just on time and smiled when he recognized Miss Melinda. "Hey, Miss Melinda," Payne greeted her as he paid the bus toll. "Hey there, Payne," Miss Melinda said with a smile. "Headed to work?" she asked him. "Yes, ma'am," Payne replied as he sat down. "Good luck," Miss Melinda commented. Payne knew that all of Jeromeson knew of what had happened only a couple days ago. "Thanks, Miss Melinda," Payne said. Payne put his headphones in and put his music on, watching the people file on the bus. Most of them were regulars. There were a few semi-regular faces and one new face. She was young-looking, perhaps 20 years old, and Chinese, or so Payne assumed, and then hoped his assumption was right. She had light tan skin and long raven black hair that she was pulling back into a bun. Excuse me, I burped. She was wearing a kimono and wooden clogs. The design was intricate and beautiful on the jade green kimono. By this time, the Chinese woman had finished putting her hair in a bun. 2 Chinese-style hairpins held the bun in place perfectly. She was ignoring the murmurs of curiosity going on around her. Payne lowered his gaze and looked out the window to gather his bearings. He had a few more stops before reaching his work. He felt someone studying him and tried his best to ignore it. It was difficult to do so, and Payne eventually glanced around to see the Chinese woman studying him with jade green eyes. Payne cautiously waved a greeting, and the Chinese woman tipped her head in a polite greeting. She looked out the window and pulled on the cord. Miss Melinda pulled over at the bus stop, and the Chinese woman got off of the bus. Payne watched as the Chinese woman went to open the new bookstore before the bus began to move again. Payne got off at his stop and headed inside Jeromeson Hospital. Work was uneventful today, though the missing female patient that had survived whatever had happened had gone noticed. No one seemed to be earnestly searching for her, and her bed was already in line for a replacement. Whatever happened to her hadn't eased any of the hospital staff's worries. Payne knew they now felt the malicious energy, which had only increased over the past 2 days. It was an almost tangible weight that seemed to delight in the slow, steady, smothering suffocation it felt like. Everyone was jumpy, suspicious, or straight-up terrified. Payne knew he was on the schedule to clean the psych ward in the morning today. He changed into his new work clothes, making sure that he had nothing that could be used as a weapon, and then headed to the psych ward, a knot of dread forming in his stomach. He reached the psych ward and buzzed the main desk. "1 minute," the receptionist told Payne when he saw it was Payne. There was a click, and Payne put the phone back on the receiver. The door opened, and after the receptionist made sure Payne had nothing that could be used as a weapon, he let Payne in. Payne began to clean, trying and succeeding in not getting involved in any conversations. He was silent as he changed the bedding. He entered one of the rooms and noticed a male, seemingly asleep as he cautiously entered. Payne silently began to change the other individual's bedding, because anyone who's been in the psych ward knows that there are sometimes people who have roommates with them in the room. Moving on. Payne finished the task and silently began to leave after making sure the male was still asleep. He wasn't asleep any longer, and he was watching Payne with the same black eyes that the female had. There were no whites or pupils to them. They were completely black and soulless. The male sat up, and Payne noticed that they were wearing a suit that many would assume was a business suit. Payne took in the male's appearance. He had black hair, as well as black eyes, and pale skin that seemed paler when compared to his hair and eyes and the blood-red shirt that he wore underneath his suit jacket. He watched as Payne swallowed nervously, and then Payne left the room. The suited man got up and went to the entrance of his doorway, which was forced to remain open. There was no door, after all. He watched as Payne finished clearing the bedding of the irritating patients, the shower room and hallways, recreational rooms, and main area. How much longer we got on this? Oh, please be soon. Okay. He knew Payne felt him watching him and eventually approached the holy human. By this time, the little rabbit had finished changing his bedding. He watched as Payne jumped slightly. He tilted his head to one side as Payne lowered his gaze to the suited man's black dress shoes, polished to the point where Payne could almost see his reflection. "So you're the little rabbit," the man sighed. Payne was silent, deciding it was best to say nothing right now, or at all for that matter. The man studied Payne and realized with slight surprise that Payne had no idea as to what he was. Payne's spiritual energy did manifest in the ways that any dormant ability would. However, though Payne had no pleasant experiences to really dwell on, his spiritual energy had not yet begun to awaken. And while it was obvious to any human would have no idea. Apparently, the little rabbit had no idea of what he was capable of either. The little rabbit who had the ability to become a ferocious lion. The little rabbit who seemed to harbor more spiritual energy than anyone else who had been like him. Though all of the other beings like him had perished, this little rabbit, who had the potential of being a relentless force, might actually have a chance to survive whatever trials and possible life-threatening situations that came his way. This little rabbit who had no idea of the situation he was currently in. Because while the man had been ordered to not harm the rabbit, that didn't mean the man couldn't give the rabbit a good fright. Readjustment in my posture because it was becoming uncomfortable. The man decided it was best not to do this and silently let Payne go past him. Payne swiftly changed the man's bedding, somehow making no errors, and then, without running, left the room once again. Once again. The man watched as Payne left the psych ward to complete his workday elsewhere. The man sighed and tested the growing menace in the air. An entire coven had been slaughtered. The man had made sure that the now dead female demon had completed this task. There needed to be one more sacrifice before 2 days' time in order for the suited demon's prince to arrive. One normal, non-magical human needed to die. Then the demon's prince would not be weakened when he arrived. It was up to the suited demon to do this task. He glanced around the psych ward, keeping to the wall as he did this, and, to his relief, found exactly what he was looking for. The only normal, non-gifted human within this chaotic place. She would have to do, and he would have to act fast, or his prince would be weak and very angry. And the demon had no intention of being tortured for not completing the task he had. Not that the demon would show any type of pain easily. However, he had no choice but to relinquish his former throne due to the fact the current prince had, though after many years, managed to make the former prince writhe, whimper, and scream with detested agony. I must have a sip of soda. Okay, we're still going. Detested agony. Years after the current prince had managed to do so, he had continued to torture the former prince with sadistic pleasure whenever the former prince could no longer bite back, voicing his anguish. The former prince had relinquished his throne, though with great loathing, after the current prince had decided he had enough fun and had released the former prince. The current prince was well versed in the art of torture. Human souls were easy for the current prince to torture. Whenever the current prince had another demon that needed punishment, it was a challenge he always willingly accepted. The former prince had no desire to leave his task incomplete. He had no desire to face his prince's wrath, and hatefully voiced the anguish his prince would happily inflict. Acting quick was the former prince's only option to not have that happen. Acting now was better than waiting until nightfall. He walked over to the completely normal, non-gifted human girl and sat down beside her. She blinked and looked at the suited man sitting beside her. She didn't see the true nature of his eyes. To her, they were black, but they had whites to them. To her, they looked like normal eyes. She never saw what was coming as the man returned her kind smile with a polite one of his own. She felt her ribs, as well as heard her ribs, snap as something entered her chest. She heard the screams of both the staff and everyone around scream with terror. The screams sounded distant, though. The female looked down to see the man's hand buried in her chest. She knew then that the pressure around her now wildly fluttering heart was the man's hand. It happened quickly then. For some reason, she heard the man's voice clearly. "My task is now complete," was what he said, and then the pressure, his hand, gripped her heart even tighter, and then he squeezed it. After that, there was only the world that faded to black around her. The man was injected with the sleeping mix of drugs that everyone called a B-52 after he removed his hand from the now dead woman's chest. While it didn't tranquilize him to the point of sleep, it did make his vision blur and made the staff able to drag him away from the rest of the patients, restrain him, and watch him as one of the other staff members called a maximum security prison for the criminally insane. The staff member watching the suited man shuddered as the man smiled and chuckled weakly. The man knew the staff member had no idea as to what they considered to be funny to the suited man. The man knew that his prince wouldn't be weakened upon his arrival. Therefore, his prince would have no reason to unleash his wrath upon him. Hallelujah! I actually managed to read that one completely, but we're just going to act quickly in case it decides to cut out again. I do have more than a few accounts. I have a Wattpad account, which is at Tempesta771, a TikTok account, which is at AirjunCraven2, no uppercases, no spaces, under the name Tempesta Braveheart. I still don't feel like explaining that, so please don't ask. An Instagram account, which is Tempesta Braveheart, no uppercases, no spaces, under the name AirjunCraven, which is my Facebook account. If I don't know you, I will not accept. That's just me. It's nothing to do with you. It's just how I am. If I don't know you, I don't accept friend requests from people I don't know because, yeah. A Snapchat account, which is AirjunCraven, no uppercases, no spaces, and we're watching my YouTube! And I actually finally managed to get through Chapter 6 after like 4 takes, so definitely well-deserved applause. Anyway, this is where I say, one moment while I take a sip of soda. Peace out, Girl Scouts, and enjoy the mental hilarity.